Today, I want to introduce you to a new feature in Notehub we call Smart Fleets. With Smart Fleets, you can add logic to new or existing fleets that dynamically categorize your devices based off their data. Let's switch over to a demo so you can see how they work. All right, I am in Notehub and I've got two devices on this project. I've got one that's sitting right here on my desk and another one that I have set outside. And both of them are generating temperature data every 5 minutes or so to this _temp.qo note file. To show how smart fleets work, I am going to create a new fleet and we will name this high temp. And notice how Notehub now prompts me with this smart fleet checkbox. You can either set up these smart fleet rules when you are creating a fleet, or if I create one real quick without it, you can also add it in a fleet's settings as well, so you don't have to create them right when you start, and you can add these rules to your existing fleets as well. The rules themselves must go in this text area, and they must be a JSON expression that evaluates incoming device data and decides whether to add that device to the fleet, remove that device from the fleet, or just leave things alone for this bit of data. All right, let's break down what that means. First, JSON is a language you can use to query and transform JSON. We have a really thorough guide to how JSON works in our docs, so you can go to dev.blues.com. You can use our in-site search up here, and if you just look for JSON, you will find this guide. The good news, though, is that you don't really need to know a lot about JSON to add Smart Fleet rules, as the vast majority of scenarios you'll want to implement follow the exact same pattern that we cover in our documentation. So again, if you go back to dev.blues.com, you search for smart fleets, you'll find a walkthrough that covers a lot of what we're covering in this video, but you'll also find this sample JSON, which I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste in here. So I'll enable smart fleet rules and paste that in. I'll break the syntax down for you a little bit. This $=sign syntax is how you create a variable in JSON. So this expression is creating three different variables, one with a note file we want to check, one with a threshold that we're going to use a little bit later, and then this result. And in JSON, the last declared variable in a scope is created with these parentheses, is return. So whatever we set result to ends up being the result of the whole thing. And even if that syntax is a little bit weird, the actual logic here is fairly straightforward. We first check whether we're dealing with a note file that we're interested in. So this is a high temperature fleet. All we want to do is check for data coming from the _temp.qo note file. So if we're getting an event that's not from that note file, we're just going to leave the fleet alone. We're going to say this shouldn't affect device classification into this fleet. However, if we are dealing with data from that note file, we will do our actual comparison. If the temperature is greater than the threshold we have defined, so if we have a device that's sending an event where the temperature is above 20, then we're going to add that device to the fleet because this is a high temp device. Else we will remove the device from the fleet because it is not a high temp device. You might want to do more advanced things with your own smart fleet rules. You might want to check for data from multiple different note files or do some different types of comparisons. But I find this basic check is enough to get you started trying out the features and solves a lot of really common smart fleet scenarios. So to try this, I'm going to save this and then I'm going to wait a little bit. Smart fleet rules are evaluated at the end of each session or after 15 minutes of inactivity. I do create sessions pretty frequently with this data, but it still might take a few minutes, so I'll fast forward in time here just a little bit. All right, so I waited about 5 minutes so that I would get a temperature reading, a new temperature reading, and a closed session from both my device that is inside and outside. So you'll see that my device that is inside has a temp QO event with a temperature above 20, and then my device that is outside has a temp QO that is well below 20. And the cool thing is, assuming this is all going to work correctly, if I go back to my high temperature fleet, you'll see that my devices were categorized appropriately. So me, without having to manually assign devices, I have this fleet that is dynamically created and managed by the smart fleet rule that I created, which I think is really cool. And perhaps what's even cooler about this is that These smart fleets, or these fleets that have smart fleet rules, are just regular Notehub fleets, which means even though you have these rules that can intelligently classify and categorize devices, you can still treat them like fleets and do normal things. You can still set environment variables on these fleets. You can still use these fleets through the Notehub API. So if you wanted to get your devices, say with the fleets get devices endpoint, you could do that and just dynamically have a list of devices that meet your criteria. So for instance, say you needed to build a report on all of your devices that had a most recent temperature reading of above 20, you could just use this endpoint with getting this fleet that has this smart fleet rule attached to it to just get that data really quite easily. And one last thing, you still have the ability to manually apply a device to a fleet, and that assignment overrides any smart fleet rules. So for example, if I go back to my devices and I go to my device that is outside, and let's say I need to override my rule for whatever reason to perform some action, I can go in here and assign a fleet. Notice how we designate between assigned fleets and smart fleets. And I can just say that this is a high temp fleet. And if I save this and I go back to my high temp devices, the device, my outside device, is included in this fleet as well. Overall, smart fleets give you a ton of flexibility for grouping your devices in a dynamic way. If you have questions about how smart fleets work, or if you just want help with some JSONata, feel free to reach out at our developer forum at discuss.blues.com. And to stay up to date on the latest developer news from Blues, sign up for our developer newsletter at dev.blues.com/developer-news.